Jonathan was one of the most intense individuals I've ever known. I've changed his name for privacy purposes, but let's call him Jonathan. So I joined the wrestling team when I was actually in junior high. At the time, I did not have Olympic dreams. The reason I joined the wrestling team was because my best friend Steve Luba told me that if I did not join a sports team, I would be a loser and no girls would date me. So I was like, okay. So for whatever reason, I chose to join wrestling, which involves like wearing spandex and manhandling people. It's awesome and ridiculous all at once. Little did I know, though, when I made that decision in junior high, what I'd be getting myself into. See, our high school was a nationally known high school for its wrestling program, consistently nationally ranked. And just to translate that into your language, they took wrestling very, very seriously at this like small farm town school in the middle of Ohio. Like they bred their farm boys for wrestling, okay? I'm not exaggerating. Families would move from across the nation to St. Paris, Ohio. I want you to think like Spring City with more tractors. They would move from across the nation to our school district so they could be part of our wrestling program. They took this very, very seriously. These boys, they would eat, sleep, breathe wrestling. But of all the intense wrestlers I knew, Jonathan stood out. So my freshman year, he was a senior, and he made it through the first half of the season undefeated, and there was no surprise there. That man was the most intense man I had ever met. He would do anything to win. I'm pretty sure he would kill me if I got in the way. I mean, like, he was just cutthroat. Anything to win, anything to win. He lived for wrestling. And then, though, halfway through the season, something surprising happened. We went to Medina, Ohio, which is one of the greatest, if not the greatest at the time, high school wrestling tournament in the entire nation. Whoever wins there usually is the national champ in their weight class, and it came down to the finals, and Jonathan lost by 1 point. Now, a normal person, if they lost in the finals, they'd be like, okay, I'm number 2 in the nation, that's pretty good. They would brush themselves off and say, but how can I get better and get back? But not Jonathan. Jonathan, after he lost, he took a vow of silence. He committed to not speak another word until he had won the state championship undefeated. So for the next months, I mean at least a month and a half, 2 months, he did not speak a word. I know. And of course, not surprisingly, he won, undefeated for the rest of the season, won state championship. And then, so after high school, I kind of lost track of him. We stayed in touch a little bit through some mutual friends, became friends on social media, whatever. But I really didn't know or hear almost anything about him until a couple years ago. Like this is years after high school, right? He makes the national news. So this story, you just got to know Jonathan for this to make sense. Like, picture this. Jonathan decides to run what's called the Flying Pig Marathon, which is in Cincinnati, Ohio. It's one of the largest marathons in the United States. Thousands and thousands run it every single year. And so for whatever reason, though, on game day, he makes the game day or the race day decision to borrow his dad's running shorts. You know, the kind with like the built-in underwear in it and stuff, like make you faster or whatever. And for whatever reason, he decides that and he starts running. And then in running about 10 miles deep into the marathon, they're chafing, they're falling down, they don't fit quite right. And at about 10 miles deep into the marathon, they fall off. Now, most people, at this point, they would stop running. This would be a problem. But what does Jonathan do? He says, no, I'll figure this out. And he keeps running. Now, to his credit, though, he takes off his shirt and says, I'm going to just tie it around my waist and I'm going to finish the race. I mean, what? 16 more miles? Can't be bad. So he does it. He ties this around, makes it a few more miles, and it keeps falling. And then at a certain point, about, mile 15 or something, the shirt falls off. Now, at this point, most people would say, I'm running in nothing but socks and tennis shoes through a major city. In front of crowds of thousands, this is a problem, but but not Jonathan. No. He's like, I can do this. I'm almost done. And he keeps on running. At this point, the police get involved. They're like yelling, stop! And then imagine this scene through downtown Cincinnati, a naked man running, a whole crowd of police following him. Finally, they say to him, if you don't stop, we're going to taser you. Now, at this point, most people would think, I'm running through a major metropolitan. Thousands of people are watching me. Police are chasing me. They're going to taser me. Maybe I should stop. Oh, but not Jonathan. They tasered him. Just the image of a running man tasered. In fact, my favorite headline from the day was this. Naked marathon runner tasered. A marathon runner who stripped during a race stunned authorities who returned the favor, giving him a taser jolt. Actual headline from Cincinnati. Later, he was questioned and asked, why didn't you stop? He said, I wasn't willing to give up over something so small as losing my shorts. Now, that image, not of a naked man getting tasered, that was funny, of a man, full-grown man, running naked through the streets, unwilling to stop for anything, that's biblical. I'm not even joking. Like, that is something straight out of the Bible. As ridiculous as this sounds to us, this is something that we see in scriptures time and again. Hebrews chapter 12. Therefore, since we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, so many people are watching us as we run our race, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus. Nothing will stop us. Nothing will stop us. Nothing will stop us. You know what this image is? An Olympic runner who literally takes off everything and runs naked in front of a great crowd of witnesses to finish the race, no matter the cost, no matter the cost, no matter the cost. But it's not just the author of Hebrews. The Apostle Paul uses this again and again and again. We see it in Galatians 2, Galatians 5, Philippians 2. Let me show you a few of the key passages. Philippians 3, brothers and sisters, I do not consider myself yet to have taken hold of it. I've not arrived in life. I'm not done with my race. But one thing I do, forgetting what is behind and straining towards what is ahead, I press on towards the goal to win the prize. Acts chapter 20, I consider my life worth nothing to me. My only aim is to finish the race and complete the task the Lord Jesus has given me. My only aim is to finish the race. Nothing will stop me. Nothing will stop me. And then, of course, on his deathbed, he says, yeah, I'm going to die. Any moment now, my life is being poured out like a drink offering. And what's his closing words we read in scriptures? I've fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. And now there is in store for me a crown of righteousness. Like, do you see it? Do you see it? This image of an athlete, a champion, someone who will not stop for anything, someone whose whole life is about the training, about finishing the goal, about a will to win. That's the picture of the Christian life. That's the picture of following Jesus. So today's text, we are going to pull out this graphic, visceral, like emotive image of an athlete who's willing to do anything, who completely conforms their life for one thing. They give as 110%, right? No pain, no gain. All of those statements that you hear in athletics, that image, the Apostle Paul is going to pull that up, make you think of the greatest athletes you've ever thought of, and say, if that's what an athlete is willing to do to win a game, to win a race, to win one of their little crowns, what are you willing to do to finish the course God set for you? That's the question. So if you've been with us the past few weeks, we are in 1 Corinthians. We're in 1 Corinthians chapter 9. We're in this major section where we've been talking about this odd topic of food sacrificed to idols. Last week, in particular, the Apostle Paul said to the Corinthians, You need to give up your personal rights for the sake of winning others. Like I do, I give up everything. To the Jew, I'll become a Jew. The Gentile, to the weak, I'll become weak. I will become all things to all men so that some might be saved. I'll do anything to win people to Christ, to win our world, to make it more like his kingdom. I will do anything, the Apostle Paul says. And to them, he's saying to the Corinthians specifically, though, when we talk about personal rights, what I want you to give up specifically is stop eating at pagan temples. Stop it. When you eat there, he says, you're promoting idol worship. People are literally worshiping false gods there. And if a new Christian sees you doing that, and the new Christian, they're still wrestling with this idea that there's only one God, and they see you do that, their faith might be destroyed. They might go back to idol worship. They might start worshiping at the temples again. Don't do it. And this seems like a reasonable rule. Like, don't participate in idol worship. Okay, anyone? No. But here's the deal. Here's the problem. It comes with an enormous social and economic price tag. So for the Corinthians to stop going to the temple was social suicide. That's where all the weddings, all the parties, all the anniversaries, every celebration, every funeral, that's where it took place. It meant you were cutting yourself off from all your friends, from the social life of Corinth. It meant economic suicide. That's where business transactions took place, where trades were made, where networking happened, where you found your next job. To cut yourself off from that was economic and social suicide. So the Corinthians, they're just not feeling this. They're like, Paul, you're asking too much. Idols don't exist. We can go there. There's no problem with it. It's not a big deal. Why would we give up so much? And their message is basically like, sure, we love Jesus. Don't get us wrong. I love Jesus. I believe in Jesus. But that doesn't mean I can't go to pagan temples. Like those idols don't actually exist. I can do whatever I want. Like that's just too much to give up. Which brings us to the text. 1 Corinthians chapter 9, starting in verse 24, the Apostle Paul starts like this. He says, do you not know, here's the question, do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? And what's the answer to this? Yes, of course they know, of course we know, but of course the Corinthians know in particular. It's like asking someone in Philly, do you know who won the Super Bowl last year? Does anyone know? Anyone? Yeah. So ancient Corinth was the home of what's famously known as the Isthmian Games, right? These are giant games that have been going on since at least the 5th century BC. It's a biannual, so every other year, competition in honor of Poseidon. It's held in the sacred grove of pine trees that were planted in honor of Poseidon. And the whole idea of this is that every other year, the world's best athletes, it's flip-flopped with the Olympic Games, right? The athletes would go from Olympia one year, the next year they prepare for these games. And so they would come here, the world's best athletes would come to this spot, and they would compete in a whole battery of games for glory, honor, fame. It was second in the world only to the Olympic Games, okay? This is a big, big deal. At the time, this is just part of the stadium, but it took over this whole field area. More than 50,000 people would show up in Corinth to go to these games, to cheer, to boo, to get drunk, to bet on matches. They were the modern equivalent of Eagles fans. Yeah. You see, Corinthians, like Eagles fans, were known for, how do we say this nicely, for being passionate, right? They're known for their passion. So literally, the whole city would shut down. They would shut down their lives. Like, no work was to be done during the games. The one text says they would stand around all day and watch sports all night. I'm like, that sounds familiar. They would shut down their lives, spend a fortune, reshape their lives for these sports. These sporting events were the places of passion, violent outbursts, drunkenness, famous acts of stupidity, an unspeakable joy followed by defacing public property. Yeah. All that happened in Corinth, okay? So this is the picture you need right now in your mind. When the Apostle Paul starts talking about, don't you know that everyone runs a race? I'm going to look back at the text here, runs a race. He doesn't just use the generic word for race. There's 2 words for race that he could use. He uses a specific word. He's referring to a specific race. It's the word stadion, where we get the word stadium. And the stadion was not just a race, it was the race. It was the most important race. It was the most important event in all of the Panhellenic Games, both Olympics and Isthmian Games. Whoever won this race, their name was given to the games itself, and their name was actually given to the year. Do you hear that? So if you had asked an ancient Greek, what year was the Battle of Thermopylae? You know what they would say? It was the year when Astylus of Croton won the stadium. So let's, this is like, you're walking down the streets of Philly, you're like, what's the date today? And they're like, it's May the 20th, the year of the Eagles. These people, they dated their life. They formed their lives, they literally timed their lives around sporting events. Can you imagine? All right, enough of that. Let's read. Do you not know that in a race all the runners run the stadium? You know this is the most important event of all, but only one gets the prize. Now he says, run in such a way to get the prize. Like you've seen this competition, you've seen the champions, you know how intense they are, you've worshiped them, you've adored them, you've cheered them, you've followed their workout routines and their dietary regimes, you've bought like little pictures with them and bought books with them, and you wear their jerseys. You know these guys. You know how they live. You know what they do to win. Live like that. You run to win. You run in life to get the prize. Now, I want you to be clear here. Paul is not saying that life is a competitive sport, but he is saying that there are ways to win in life and there are ways to lose. And if you don't know the difference, you're in big, big trouble. Nobody just ever happened to win the Olympics. Never just happened. Like they showed up like, look, someone out of the crowd just came and won. No, that's never, ever happened. It takes intense training, and the same is true in life. So a little book I stumbled upon a couple years ago, Angela Duckworth's Grit. Some of you might be familiar with it. Excellent little book. She gives research on what makes the best of the best the best of the best. Like how do you become world class, a world class expert in something? How do you move beyond just being good to being truly great in your field? How do you make that kind of jump? And she says many people assume that it has to do with natural gifting. Like some people are just naturals. And there's something to this, right? Like, so I took 6 months to try and practice to learn how to play the guitar. And I practiced for days and days. My fingers hurt. And after 6 months of practicing, I was like, listen, Jenny, I can play this song. And I picked this little song. And she had not picked it up ever. She picked it up and I was like, how's that go? And she played it better than me. I was like, that's not fair. So there is something, right? There's something to this. But she says, in the end, when you get to those top levels, natural ability is not a predictor of success. It's not. And she talks about what you might be familiar with, the general rule of thumb, the 10,000-hour rule. That anyone who goes from being good to being truly excellent, the greatest, the virtuoso in whatever they do, in the violin, in the piano, in athletics, in basketball, and using different examples, computer programming, software engineering, all these things. To become that great, you usually have to devote 10,000 hours to becoming that. So it takes a long time. But then the other thing she says is it's not just about quantity of time, it is about quality of time. So what differentiates, and she shows this graph, what differentiates someone who gets a certain level and they never really improve? She calls that arrested development. Between that and a world-class expert, what differentiates between someone who's been playing golf their whole life and really, they're pretty much the same, right? They reach a certain level and they never get better. Someone who's been preaching there for years and years and never get better. Someone who's been doing art or music or whatever, sports. And she said, what's the difference? And she says the difference between someone who's good and someone who's great is what she calls deliberate practice. Deliberate practice. It is not just doing the same things over and over again that won't make you better. That won't make that won't lead to that excellence. She says it's in analyzing everything you do, usually with a coach, and then repeatedly working to improve the small parts of your performance that make a difference. So it's a golfer paying attention to exactly what his swing is and having coaching exactly on how he holds the clubs. It's the swimmer thinking exactly through the turns, watching videos of themselves. It's literally me. Every week I force myself to watch my sermons. It's terrible. Sorry, Paul. Right now, I would like to apologize to you. It's terrible because I've got to see all of my mistakes. What are the things that are working and what are not if I'm going to get better? So you have to practice. You have to practice. You have to practice everything. She says it's hard. It's specific. It's deliberate. Now, why do I mention this? Because that's the difference between someone who runs the race and someone who runs to get the prize. The Apostle Paul says, run to get the prize. Are you deliberately practicing the way of Jesus? Are you examining your own life and saying, man, I'm making these mistakes here again and again and again. Maybe I need to change something. Are you getting coaching? Are you 100% focused? Are you getting feedback? Are you reflecting and refining? Are you creating stretch goals spiritually about generosity, about loving others, about the things that you most care about passing on your faith to your kids? The Apostle Paul says, you run in such a way to get the prize. Verse 25, everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. So Isthmian Games, the athletes literally swore an oath, said, in nothing will I sin against these games, so help me Poseidon. So they swore to Poseidon that they would not sin, they would follow the rules, and then for 10 months they had to go into this training regime that constricted their diet and exactly what they did every moment of their day, how they slept, how they ate, everything. Everything was done in service to Poseidon. They literally made a pact with Poseidon that, Poseidon, if you help me win, I will honor you with my life. My win will be for your glory. So imagine that. Now, I want you to picture athletes who swear to some false god that they will give everything to them if they could just win. And now let's talk about Tom Brady. Sorry, was that a weird transition? All right, this is a better picture. So, for Tom Brady, if you're new to America, welcome. You've never watched TV, let me introduce this guy to you. This man is, statistically speaking, the best quarterback in the history of the NFL. There's really no argument about it. There's really not. The man is 40 years old, yet through superhuman discipline, this insane, famously insane dietary regime, and possibly making a deal with the devil, he shows no signs of getting worse or slowing down. He's actually getting better with age. Who does that? So when the Apostle Paul speaks of strict training, this is the picture he wants us to use. Tom Brady, a man obsessed with winning at all costs, his entire life, every moment of his day, everything he eats, everything he buys, every interaction he has, every thought he has is centered around winning the game, winning the next game, deliberate practice of every single element, getting that much better, that much better, that much better. The Apostle Paul, though, then turns it to the Corinthians and us and says this. So they do it. Athletes do it to get a crown that will not last. It was the crown of pine for the Isthmian Games. But we do it to get a crown that will last forever. So there's an old but still very much relevant video of Tom Brady. In it, he's, this is years ago, so he's something like 27 years old. He had just won 3 Super Bowl rings, all right? His third. He was married to a supermodel. He admittedly, says in the interview, he's making more money than he could possibly spend in a lifetime. But I want you to watch this moment. This is from 60 Minutes years ago. Watch this short video.
But with all that money, fame, and career accomplishments, we were surprised to hear this from him.
Why do I have 3 Super Bowl rings and still think there's something greater out there for me? I mean, maybe a lot of people would say, hey, man, this is what it is. I reached my goal, my dream, my life is me. I think, God, it's got to be more than this.
What's the answer?
I wish I knew. I wish I knew.
Why do I have 3 Super Bowl rings and still think there's something greater out there for me? What's the answer? I wish I knew. To which the Apostle Paul screams, I know! I know! You're competing for the wrong crown! You're chasing after the wrong thing! You've won 3 at the time, now 5 Super Bowls. Do you really think number 6 is going to make the difference? Like, if I just won one more Super Bowl, then I'd be happy. Then I'd find the fulfillment I'm looking for in life. If 5 Super Bowls, a supermodel, and millions of dollars don't satisfy you, I have some really, really bad news for you. You're not going to find it. You're not going to find it in that. There is something greater, Tom Brady. Something that will not fade, something that will last forever, the Apostle Paul says. But his name is Jesus. He's the author of life. What he gives you cannot be taken from you. The honor that he puts upon you, the mission that he gives you lasts forever, will echo in eternity. What he says of you will never be forgotten. He's what we're looking for. You see, they do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it, the Apostle Paul says, to get a crown that will last forever. So here's the point. If an athlete will realign their entire life, suffer through everything, eat only certain foods, break off relationships, move to certain cities, move to high altitudes to become better, VO2 max, whatever that is. If they'll go through all these hoops for a crown of pine or a Super Bowl ring, how much more should we realign our lives, be willing to face hardship, be willing to take on discipline, be willing to do extreme things for the redemption of the universe? Do you get it? Let me say to this side, the Apostle Paul is not anti-sports. I'm not anti-sports. He's just pointing out that if someone is willing to sacrifice their time, money, energy, passion, creativity, effort, and their very self for a game, shouldn't we be at least as motivated? Shouldn't we work at least that hard? Shouldn't we give at least as much time and energy and focus and money to that? Like, wouldn't it be wrong if in Philly we were more famous for the motivation and celebration of Eagles fan than the motivation and celebration of God's people for his son? Like, wouldn't it be strange if Eagles fans were more religious and worshiping than we were? Wouldn't it be insane if people were more committed to promoting their team brand than sharing the message of Jesus Christ? And on we could go. The point is this: in Philly and in Corinth, the passion of sports fans shows us the extent of human devotion and adoration. It does. The Apostle Paul thinks that maybe, just maybe, we as a church should offer a competing vision. Maybe there's something even better to give your life for. Maybe there's something worth cheering for that's even better. Maybe there's something worth paying the cost for, going 110% for, reshaping your whole life for. Therefore, he says, turning it to himself, I, as an example for all of us, I do not run like someone who's running aimlessly, like running through life aimlessly. I want you to imagine what that's like. This is a terrible, terrible picture of what I think modern life is. We're all running. We're incredibly busy. Incredibly busy. Our lives are so full of stuff. We're chasing after thing after thing after thing. But if you stop someone and ask them on the street, like, why? Why are you so busy? Why are you busy all the time? Like, what are you doing? Where's your life going? What's the purpose of your life? What are you trying to achieve with your life? They'd say, I have no idea. I'm running, but I'm running aimlessly. I don't know. When we don't know the point of life, as a result, Americans, and can I just say, including most Christians, we stop thinking of life as a race, a competition, the thing that God has called us to that's worth sacrificing for, and we start thinking of it as a fun run. Like they throw colors on you, and all your friends are there, and nobody wins or loses. And the whole point of life is just to have fun with your friends. And let's try this, and let's try this. Maybe in a more sophisticated way, Viktor Frankl famously in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, says it this way: people are most tempted to distract themselves with pleasure, to just busy themselves with stuff when their lives are void of meaning. That if we don't know why we're running, if we don't know where we're going with our life, then we will be tempted to distract ourselves with purchases, projects, vacation, sports, entertainment, the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, and just add on to our lives. Things that will make our lives so busy, but don't actually take us anywhere. Things that will never fill the void, but can numb the pain. So a few years back, there was a massive, landmark research study done of over 500,000 evangelicals on spiritual growth. This North America study called Reveal study, and in it they found that there are 4 major barriers to spiritual growth across, if you survey 500,000 people on what helps people grow, what stops people from growing, there are 4 things that specifically are barriers to spiritual growth. Here's what they are. Number 1, addictions. No surprise there, right? Addictions, yeah, that'll destroy you. Inappropriate relationships, like if you have an inappropriate emotional or physical relationship with someone else, tanks your spiritual life. Emotional issues, that our emotional and psychological health is very much connected with our spiritual health. And the last one is not prioritizing one's spiritual life. You get that? You're just too busy. Like too busy to pray, to read your Bible, to join that small group. You got too much work going on, too many good shows on TV, too many places to go, too many projects, too many things you're thinking about, too many house things you want to update. Too many, your kids are involved in too many things, too much stuff. Now I want you to hear that not prioritizing one's spiritual life has the same effect, statistically speaking, on your spiritual life as smoking crack, having an affair, or becoming clinically depressed. The Apostle Paul says, I do not run as one running aimlessly. Not me. I'm going to run with purpose. I run to win. I know what God has called me to do. And then he switches the image verse. He says, I do not fight like a boxer beating the air. Here's an actual statue from about 330 AD of a Greek boxer. You'll notice he's naked except there's some glove type things on him, right? And if you look closely, his face is full of like these terrible pot marks from where he's just been bashed and bashed. So boxing is the sport in which, similar to Ultimate Fighting Championships for us today, UFC, these men, they go out there, there's no ring, there's no timeout, there's no stopping, it's just you bash each other in the face until one of you surrenders. It's this horrific fight that would happen, and as you might imagine, it was more of a lowbrow sport. So I want you to hear this. The Apostle Paul says, I do not fight like a boxer who misses his punches. No, I'm disciplined. I make my punches. I connect every time I'm fighting. And who are you fighting, Paul? Who's this battle with? He says, no, I strike a blow to my body and make it my slave. Now, don't miss this. Paul, who's your opponent? Is it those Jews who want to kick you out of town? No, not them. Is it the 1,000 prostitutes in town and their sex trade? No, not them. Is it the pagan priests leading people in idol worship? No. Is it the tens of thousands of slave traders who are actually selling human lives and degrading humanity? Nope, not them. Well, who is it, Paul? Who's your great enemy that you have to defeat? And he says, it's me. It's me. The thing that could take me out more than anyone else is me. It's my own selfish desires. It's thinking that my life is about me. It's living for myself. Therefore, I strike a blow to my body and I make it my slave. Now, I want to be careful here. He's not literally talking about beating himself the way some medieval monks do, but the battle's real. The battle is very, very real. The Apostle Paul treats his own desires like a boxing opponent. He will not let himself be bested by short-term desires. He will not let it happen. He will not lose the battle because he chose to follow this or that desire. Like an athlete who submits all of their desires, all of the desires in their life for their one great desire to win the match. The Apostle Paul says, I'm like that. I've submitted every desire of my life under my one great desire for Jesus, his mission. I strike the blow to my body, make it my slave, so that after I've preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize. Literally in Greek there, it could say, so that after I've preached to others, I myself will not be tasered by police. No, I'm just kidding. It could say, though, it literally could say, I myself will not be shown to be a counterfeit. It's the same word, fake, a counterfeit, the same word used of counterfeit money. And the Apostle Paul says there's a counterfeit faith here. There's a faith that's fake. There's a person who says, I love Jesus, but then chooses everything else before Jesus. Like there's a person who prays, thy will be done, but then refuses to submit to God's will for their finances, for their schedule, for their relationships, for their sex life. There's a person who says, I love my neighbor, but then never actually does anything. There's a person who says, I believe in the good news, the gospel, I believe it, but then never shares it with anyone else. The Apostle Paul says it's entirely possible to be a counterfeit and fool others. And man, some of us, we're self-deceived. We can fool ourselves, but Jesus will never be fooled. Jesus will never be fooled. Jesus says it this way. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name drive out demons, perform miracles? Didn't we do all this stuff for you, Lord? We proclaim, we are Christians. We love you. Everything we did was for you, Lord. And then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. I never knew you. So let me be careful. The Apostle Paul, when he's talking here in this context, he is not trying to scare you. He's not trying to force you to question whether you're even a Christian or not. He's going to wait and do that next week. Come back. That'll be great. At this point, though, just the opposite is true. It is. He's saying this. As for me, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure I'm not disqualified. That could never be said of me. That when I stand before Jesus, he's going to look at my life. He's going to look at everything I poured out. He's going to look at my heart and my intentions and my motivations. And he's going to say, this man loves me. He loved me with everything. This man sacrificed for me. This man loves his neighbor. This man was devoted to me above all things. This man rejoiced in what I rejoice in. This man knows me. And I know him. So the Apostle Paul is like, I want you to look at the athlete. I want you to look at, like, my friend Jonathan. If that's what an athlete is willing to do to win a race or win a game, how much more should we be willing to do to finish the course that God has called us to run? And here's the question, do you know what's at stake? Do you know it's bigger than a Super Bowl? Do you know what God has called you to run? Do you even know what the path is? Do you know what it looks like to win in the end? Do you know what honor awaits you? Do you know what life is really about? And the application here is so simple and so hard. That we're called to run to win. Apostle Paul is saying, don't run aimlessly. You got to practice. You got to train. Are you even trying to get better? Don't let your petty desires and distractions get in the way of you becoming the person God has called you to be. Don't let life, houses, stuff, vacations become your great goal in life, because that's what you'll get. Don't let those get in the way of the best thing. Give up anything that gets in the way. Pay the price. Pay the price. Let it form your diet, your schedule, your finances, your relationships, your entertainment, where you live, everything. You and I are called to be part of something eternal. We're called to be part, and last week, the Apostle Paul used the language, we're called to partner with God in the gospel. That we can actually be part of seeing people saved His language. We can win them His language. We can actually see, we can make a difference in the lives of our neighbors and community and children. And in the end, success is this. On your deathbed, you can say with the Apostle Paul, "For I am already being poured out like a drink offering, and the time for my departure is near. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. And now what's in store for me is a crown of righteousness." So I'm going to close and I'm going to pray, but here's what I want you to do. I hope that you feel really uncomfortable right now, because I do. I'm like, am I running to win? Have I evaluated my life, my heart? Like, am I the person I want to be when I stand before Jesus? And I don't know about you, but I got a long ways to go, and I got a lot of work to do, and I need teamwork, and I need coaching, and I need help. And you probably do too. But at this message, while it's somewhat for the Apostle Paul a pep rally, it's more than that. He's not just calling us to be, yeah, we can do it, but he's calling us to go out and actually do something different. And it's not rocket science. Right now, you probably know at least one thing you need to give up because it's distracting you from what God's called you to be, and one thing you should be working on, something you should be practicing deliberately, something you should become better at. Can I just encourage you to take this time to not feel a big emotional, like, yeah, let's do something, but to actually do something? Let me pray. Father, I pray that we would be a people who don't just speak of passion for you with our words, but who live it out, who don't just say we believe in you, but we live hard after you, who don't just say we want to follow Jesus, but who follow Jesus in forgiveness and grace and generosity and justice and peace and love. And God, right now I pray that you would lay on our hearts very, very clearly to each and every one of us. What's the distraction we need to get rid of? What's the thing that's causing us to stumble along the way and we need to throw it off? And what's the thing we need to work on? What's the thing we need to replace it with? What's the thing we need coaching and we need to focus on and we need to deliberate practice? Not for our honor, but so that we can know you and love you and represent you the way that we're called to. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.